Good evening. My name is Dominic McClinton, and I have the privilege of moderating tonight's question and answer session with the Glynn County Police Department finalist for our chief's position. Mr. Jacques Battiste. Mr. Battiste, I want to thank you for your willingness to join us this evening as we have a very important discussion on your thoughts about the Glynn County Police Department. We would like to thank our citizens for attending this event, both here in person and virtually, and those of you that submitted questions in advance. Some of the questions submitted have been combined for brevity or language added for content, but we have done our best to hold true to the spirit of each question. We plan to keep this meeting to an hour to respect everyone's time. So again, I'd like to say thank you, and before I begin asking any questions, I'd like to take the opportunity for Mr. Battiste to provide any type of statement or address the community as he chooses.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I sit before you in great honor of this opportunity to possibly be the next chief of police for Glynn County. I want to thank, most importantly, the Georgia Bureau of Chiefs. I want to thank the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the Glynn County Board of Commissioners, as well as our distinguished moderator tonight, and anyone else, as well as the Glynn County Police Department, who has played a key role in helping to make this opportunity possible. I can simply tell you this: I know there are a lot of naysayers in the, that may be in the audience or here in Glynn County. I want you to know I come with the experience necessary to work and build and continue to build a dynamic that will make Glynn County a continued pride of the state of Georgia as well as the United States. Those of you who feel that I may not have the credentials, I just want you to I ask you just to give me an opportunity to let me show you that I do have the capabilities to make things happen, not just for certain individuals, but for everyone that's present. Because when it comes down to it, each of us deserves the same respect that we ask for. And that begins with a healing process as well as a dependability in the police department that you have come to love and know. And even though there have been setbacks, I can promise you that there is a brighter day set ahead for Glynn County. It's been run very well so far, but the enhancements that I hope to help bring to the department will only serve to make it better for the entire community. Thank you.
At this time, sir, we're not taking any questions from the...
I'm not a computer man, but I thought we were going to have a chance to ask the candidate some questions.
I will get to the point of asking questions that's been previously submitted. However, we're not taking questions from the open, because that's not the position in which... Sir, that's not the position in which the county administrators set that up for this particular forum. There will be other opportunities for you and others to ask questions in the future.
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to work with you and answer your question.
Before I begin asking any questions that were submitted, I'd like to take an opportunity to read a statement from Acting Chief of Police, Mr. Ricky Evans. I regret that I have a pre-existing travel arrangements to attend training out of state, and I will not be in town this week while you're here. And he's addressing this to you, Mr. Battiste. Please know that I would like to be here and to personally introduce you to the citizens of Glynn County and stand beside you as you address them for the first time. Please know I will be supporting you from afar, and do not hesitate to reach out if there's anything that I can do to assist you while you're here. Again, welcome to Glynn County, and look forward to a great partnership to build a strong community. And that was from Mr. Ricky Evans, Acting Chief of Police. So our very first question that we'd like to ask is, what are your thoughts on police officers' involvement with the community they serve on a regular basis, and not just when enforcing laws?
In order for there to be sufficient trust between the people who the community is asking to be served and the police department, it is my belief that officers should not just be compelled to answer certain calls. Officers need to be invested in the communities that they serve. Too often, we've seen in the past officers who only respond to dynamic calls, but aren't willing to make the investment in the communities they patrol. Communities that want to believe in their police departments need to know that those officers want to be a part of that police department. Our officers have to be willing to go above and beyond what the job calls for at times. The word is called servility. We have to be willing to serve beyond just what the uniform dictates. And by that, we have to be held accountable, not just in uniform for our actions, but when we're out of the uniform. We may not live in the same communities that we patrol, but we need to be willing to be active in those same communities. We have to get out of those vehicles. We have to interact with the general public. We have to be ambassadors for Glynn County, especially in law enforcement. We are the people who visitors as well as the citizens remember from the morning up to the sun down. And it is important that our officers have the trust of the community, and the only way they can do that is to show the community that they care beyond what the job calls for.
Thank you, sir. As a continuation or secondary part of that question, how do you feel about the community policing model, and did you support that model for Glynn County?
I do support the community policing model, having served as a fellow with the International Association of Chiefs of Police and with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. While a fellow, I helped to build that whole dynamic of community policing. And the term has now actually been changed to community engagement. We're getting away from the word policing because being a law enforcement officer in today's society requires you to be smarter than just someone who carries a gun and a badge and a set of handcuffs. We have to be willing to be problem solvers way beyond just what the job is entailed. If we see someone that is dealing with a situation in their neighborhood, a pothole that needs to be fixed, a fire hydrant that is off canter, if there's a lighting issue, we have the power and the ability as members of the police department to call the Department of Public Works, the fire department, anyone necessary to solve those same problems you may be having trouble getting answers and resolve to. We work within a consortium in Glynn County, and we need to be able to support Glynn County, not just from a law enforcement perspective, but from an everyday serving component perspective in the community itself.
Thank you, sir. We'll maybe have an opportunity later, but not at this time.
Sir? Yes, sir. My apologies. Is that better? Okay. My apologies. Thank you, sir.
Is the mic clear enough for everyone to hear? Can you hear us in the very rear? Thank you. What are your thoughts and opinions about a Citizens Review Board?
I believe a Citizens Review Board has great opportunities because it allows the citizens to have a greater transparency into what goes on in the department. They are able to see certain things that are going on as long as it's not a violation of the investigative process. They have an opportunity to see when there is a situation that has developed and have an opportunity to have a voice in how it should be transcribed and how it should be solved. If there's an issue there that requires adjudication, the Citizens Review Board has a right, speaking as members of the society that the police department serves, to have the ability to advise the police department on what may be the best recommendations moving forward, not just for the officer involved, but for the department itself to make it more effective.
This question is a little bit lengthy and it's multifaceted, so if you would, please indulge me. A Better Glynn and other citizens have raised concerns about the behavior of our officers in public and on social media. What are your thoughts about holding police officers accountable for their actions when engaging with citizens in the community? And then the second part of that question is, how will you hold Glynn County Police Department officers accountable to higher standards of conduct on and off duty?
Well, most importantly, we all have a right to be respected. We all have a right each day to receive the same respect that we garnish out to each person. Officers, even though they're trusted figures in the community, are not exceptions to the rule. They are required to be servants of the people, but they also are expected to bring the same level of respect that is due to them. If you have a civilian or a person that is being outlandish or being demonstrative in their thought process and using expletives, raising their voice, it doesn't mean the officer should be matching that same level. If anything, the officer should be able to decompress or deconflict the situation and move away from it. One of the future things I'd like to do with the department is make sure every one of the officers, as well as administrative personnel, has gone through a conflict resolution course. It's called verbal judo. It's a very simple course that teaches you that as the person you're dealing with is becoming more agitated, more outgoing, you should be getting calmer. And if you're not able to do that, one of your fellow officers who's responded to the scene with you should be willing to step forward. They see that you're beginning to get agitated. Officer Jones, step back, I got this. They should be willing to take over, but what should never happen should be two individuals having extreme conflict and screaming and yelling at each other, and one of them wear the uniform of this county. What was the second part of that question?
How will you hold Glynn County Police Department officers accountable to high standards of conduct on and off duty?
The best way that I can do that is simply to lead by example. I believe that if you set the right example based on ethics, having your moral compass set at true north, you should expect your officers to meet that same level of expectation. I expect every officer that is in our community and our police department, being Glynn County, to bring the very best to every day to the table. I need their A game every day. If they feel that they want to cut corners, take disadvantaged turns, then it may be a time for them to have first a resolution meeting with me and the command staff. If they still cannot meet the necessary needs to continue the job, then maybe we need to help them seek life elsewhere. What I will not tolerate is any type of impropriety on behalf of the officers in this police department, our police department. I want them to be held to a higher standard. I want this police department to be something all of you can be proud of in Glynn County, but more importantly, that the officers themselves can be proud of. I want us to become a role model police department for the United States. I want the rest of this country to be able to look and say, you know what, Glynn County may not have gotten it right initially, but look at what they're doing now. Look at the justice that they're bringing to the table. Every day these officers put on the uniform and go out and face the public.
Thank you, sir. As the police chief, what steps will you take to ensure transparency within the police department and equitable policing in Glynn County community?
If you would allow me, going back to the previous question, I want it to be understood that when should I be ordained to move forward as the chief of police, there's a complete review of the SOPs for the department. Once we have a redesigned SOP, if anything needs to be changed within it, which is the standard operating procedures, for those of you who don't know, each officer, once they've reviewed it, they're going to sign a new oath of understanding that these are the new guidelines by which this department is going to function. Once they sign that, they're given a understanding that they will follow the guidelines of that department to the letter. Anyone deviating outside of that flight plan will be dealt with and adjudicated in a swift and decisive manner. And I will sign the same oath myself. And the question again for the
Absolutely.
next one.
As the police chief, what steps will you take to ensure transparency within the police department and equitable policing in the Glynn County community?
Transparency is always the key to maintaining good order in your community. A community that understands the direction that its police department is working, the things that it's trying to accomplish, is a community that has trust in its department. It's a community that understands that this department is working to make life better, not just for a few, but for everyone. The best way that we can make sure that there is transparency is one of the things I will do is make sure that social media and a chief's letter goes out on a weekly format to all of the citizens of Glynn County, which helps you to understand some of the things that we're engaging. It keeps you informed with a lot of the police operations up to the level that I can share it with you without getting into the investigative components of what's going on. But I can also promise you that as we get positive results back from whatever investigations, whatever police actions that we're undertaking, it will serve to also let you all know exactly what is happening in your community. It also makes you aware of problems that may be existent. And it also will encourage you to come forward and bring issues that you felt in the past Glynn County Police Department may not have been able to deal with successfully.
Thank you, sir. The next question that's been posed to us, or to you, are what are your plans or thoughts on how to restore the trust between the Glynn County Police Department and the minority communities within Glynn County?
As I stated earlier, one of the first things I want to do is bring in a number of instructors from a national level who have had marketable success in working in communities who have suffered through these same miscarriages that have occurred in the past. Rebuilding trust is something that isn't going to happen overnight. It has to be a trust, or it has to be an understanding between the parties who feel they're aggrieved and the parties who feel that there is no grievance. It has to be an opportunity for each side to recognize and understand the feelings that each other side is happening. Through these different courses that are going to be offered, one of the first things that the police department is going to understand is implicit bias. Everyone in the police department, no matter how good of an officer they are, will find that they have some form of implicit bias towards whomever it may be. The problem is that the public needs to be re-educated also. The public is going to have to go through courses on understanding implicit bias. We have a very strong country here that's based upon constitutional values and dynamics. The problem is we have deviated from what the true understanding of what this country is about, and that's fairness for every citizen in this country. But unfortunately, the socioeconomics that we are seeing that are out here have driven us to become a divided nation, either through race, through social design, or through economic empowerment. And what we have to do is make sure that this community, if no other community in this country, feels that they live in a just and fair environment. And the best way we can do that is to get different courses, to get the public to identify, to get the police department to identify the problems that exist and seek a healing process. How will I reach out to the different communities? When I was the chief at Xavier, the first thing I did, we patrolled up to 2 miles outside of the university. All previous chiefs that served at Xavier University were only concerned with what happened within the curtilage of that university. We patrolled up to 2 miles outside of, with an understanding with the local police department that we would respond to situations that even didn't even involve the university, but we had students that lived in that community, we had people who parked in that community that walked to the campus, so it was only fair that we patrol up to 2 miles outside. But in that time, my officers went into these neighborhoods, I went into these neighborhoods, and I made a difference, we made a difference in getting the community to trust us. Through time, through interdiction, through responding to different things, we were able to then be approached by the same citizens who had such a grave mistrust of us to start solving the problems that they saw. They would let us know when drug deals were happening. They would let us know who committed what crimes, who shot whom. When shots were fired, my officers were generally first on scene before the local police department. It's the same dynamic with Glynn County. I intend to work with all of the minority groups as well as all groups in this community, Chamber of Commerce, as well as the local community activist groups, Glynn County First, and several others who have an aggregate of minority groups that want a better Glynn County. The best way we can do that is I have to be a representative with them, understand their problems, their issues, as well as the problems and issues overall within the county. The only way we can do that is to sit at a table, have dialogue, talk, and then work towards building a stronger tomorrow. I know I sound like I'm prattling on, but believe me, my mind is spinning even now with ideas of how we can move forward to try to reach a better tomorrow for this county.
Thank you, sir. Your bio discusses your work with President Obama's 21st century policing model. Do you plan on implementing that model within Glynn County Police Department? That's the first part of the question. Second part is, what things do you see in the current Glynn County Police Department practices that would benefit for incorporating that model?
To answer the question in the order that you've asked, while serving under the 21st Century Policing Community as the FBI representative, 6 main pillars were designed that law enforcement now uses as a standard to maintaining the community that they patrol. The first of those was building trust and legitimacy. We have to rebuild the trust that's been lost between the police department and the community. We have to legitimize what it is that we choose to do every day. So that is the first thing. The second is we have to develop better policy and oversight. We have to make sure that the situations that have occurred in the past involving Glynn County never happen again. Whether it's under my command, whether it's under the command of Chief Evans, or anyone else that takes command within this department, these type of things are not appreciated, nor are they respected or accepted by anyone in the community. And to lose the trust of the people means we have lost the fight that we are so representing of. Technology and social media. We understand that technology is an ever-growing problem. Cyber design, cyber terrorism, cyber threats are constant. We have to build to meet those. We also have to make sure that social media garnishes a positive image of what law enforcement is doing, not just the negatives. Everyone is so quick to show the negative stories that law enforcement is always involved in. The problem with social media is it can be tailored to show whatever message you want, not the whole story. So what we have to do is capture positive social media and make sure that people see the whole story of what's going on. Community policing and crime reduction. These are constants that always must be in place. The fifth thing is training and education. We have to constantly train. Officers and community get better through training that they receive, that are sponsored, that meet the metrics of the problems that they are seeing in their own society. We have to be willing to step up and take responsibility for the problems that we have and work together to solve them. Training and education. I intend, with our department, to have the very best educated police officers in the country. They will receive the best training that we can afford or that we can get donated to us from federal, state, local, and even international agencies that are willing to come into Glynn County based upon what they're seeing and help us to build a better tomorrow for this county and for everyone that lives in the state of Georgia. And finally, officer safety and wellness. I take great pride in protecting the officers that I work with. I'm only as good as my weakest officer in my department. I will defend my officers for anything that they do within the job requirements and design as long as they are doing the job correctly. But if they deviate outside of the plan of what the department is about, they violate the core values of what the department is asking for, or they violate the trust of the community, and they're found guilty of such, they're going to have to seek life elsewhere. And I promise you, they won't seek life elsewhere as a law enforcement officer. I will write every chief, every sheriff, every law enforcement agency in the country and let them know about these individuals or this individual so that they never are egregiously acting in anyone else's culture or environment also. So with those 6 pillars, that was the major format of what we walked away with from that Obama 21st Century Policing. These would be excellent dynamics for this department. But the thing is, they can also be utilized with the current design of the department. Chief Evans has done a great job in reaching out to you all, building trust in the community. I recognize that. I serve only to learn from the inroads that he has already reached in the community, the trust he's already garnered from all of you, and I want to take that and enhance. I told my the command staff when I met them this morning at the police department, change is a word I don't embrace. I believe in enhancements. I believe there's a legacy that's already here that has gotten Glynn County well on its way to being a really successful police department, once again, a department that you can truly trust and believe in, but it's going to take a consistency that we keep moving forward based on the pillars that have already been put in place.
Thank you, sir. Now, you mentioned a couple of things that will lead up to my next question as it relates to accreditation for the Glynn County Police Department.
Yes, sir.
So I'll go into that question. Glynn County Police Department has been unaccredited for quite some time now. What specific plans can you lay out to address getting the department accredited? Please explain your understanding of the significance of Georgia certification and ultimately CALEA accreditation on how long do you think it will take to obtain both distinctions for the Glynn County Police Department? And I know I said a lot, so I'm more than happy to break that down one
Repeat
question
each
at a
question.
time. Sure thing.
Let's take them one at a time.
Absolutely. What specific plans can you lay out to address getting the department accredited? That's the first question.
All right. To answer your question, sir, the first thing we have to do is recognize first what happened for them to lose the accreditation if they ever had it. What happened for them to be denied accreditation? And more importantly, if they did not have it, what is stopping them from receiving reaccreditation? Once we look at the overarching issues that have happened within the department, we start working towards solving those problems. We set up meetings with CALEA and with the other standards groups in the Georgia State Board, and we figure out the things we need to be doing. IACP did a feasibility study of the Glynn County Police Department back in 2019 or 2020, and it laid out the different steps that the department needed to take in order to become enhanced and reach their accredited process once again. So with those recommendations, along with re-meeting with CALEA and sitting down with our command staff, working with the Board of Commissioners, and most importantly, having insight from all of you, we can then start building towards reaccreditation of the department, because without it, we're not recognized as a truly successful and effective police department by policing standards in the United States. And the Georgia, if I remember correctly your questions, the Georgia Board and their accreditation process has their own set of standards by which they hold everyone accountable here within the state of Georgia. Glynn County is probably one of the most profitable, successful counties in the state of Georgia. It deserves a police department that mirrors such as well.
You've answered the second part of that question, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the final piece, and that is, how long do you think it will take to obtain both distinctions, both CALEA and Georgia certification for the Glynn County Police Department?
All I can say is until I can get a good look at it, a good snapshot of what's going on, I can't give you an exact timeline. I can promise you that I will continue to move forward and working with the department, work to reach those standards. If you want me to look into a crystal ball, I'll say 3 years or less. That's my goal, to try to reach this goal within 3 years or less. But that takes a lot of hard work from the officers of Glynn County, as well as from the community of Glynn County, wanting to believe and trust in those officers to do the best they can to reach this accredited process. You'll have to forgive me. I, having worked in the Bureau, working for the federal government, I've sat before Senate oversight committees, and I've never felt as nervous as I do today with all of you. Boy, I don't see a friendly face in the audience, so forgive me for that, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to continue answering the questions for you.
Well, I'll try to slow down just a little bit on the bombardment of questions, so I'll take them, break them into one at a time, if that will help a little.
No. I'm just looking at everyone, and everyone is intensely waiting for me to, I don't know. So I'm going to breathe now.
All right. So the next question that I will throw your way is, if you are appointed as Chief of Police of the Glynn County Police Department, what would be your 3 highest priority issues to address?
Having met some of the community members from just driving around and interacting, and then meeting with the Board of Commissioners, and then, of course, meeting with our department today, the command staff, there are 3 main goals that I would want to work on. First off would be to restoring the trust of the police department and the community. But more importantly, I want to rebuild the morale that's in the department for those officers who feel that the department has lost its way. So that would be the first thing I want to do. That would lead also to recruiting and retention, which would be the second thing. It's my understanding that you don't often see the officers on the street because we're busy racing from call to call. We need to increase the manpower in the department. It's my understanding that when certain calls are made, it's up to 30 minutes that officers respond. Unacceptable. But you also have to admit, 423 square miles with only 133 officers. That's a yeoman's task that most people can't meet. The officers should be commended for doing the best they can up until this date, but we're going to continue with the recruitment process to bring in at least 25 or 30 more officers. But what we would also do in the process is give you a department that is reflective of the community that it trusts, that trusts it, a reflective of a community that they see others who look like them. In other words, get more diversity within the department. We would like to get more African Americans, more Hispanics, more Asian Americans to join the department, to balance the playing field in the sense of people are more comfortable seeing a greater diversified police department. If it doesn't happen, we will continue to recruit with whomever shows up, as long as they're qualified officers. We want the very best, but when they come to this department, they have to understand you bring your A game every single day. If you're having a bad day, I'd rather you take a day off than come to work, because what I'm not going to have you do is embarrass the people of Glynn County ever again, but more importantly, embarrass yourself in this department.
As you address those three highest priorities, what do you see as the obstacles to achieving those?
Who's my financial people in the room? No, the biggest obstacles I see is we have to get a healing process in place. Having worked civil rights for the FBI, I watched the whole Ahmaud Arbery situation unfold. Just like I watched every other incident unfold in this country. These are not our proudest moments. Some of them people may feel were justified, others may not. But that situation that happened here in Glynn County should not have ever happened, first and foremost. No loss of life is ever acceptable in any capacity. But more importantly, the way it happened, the proof was right there. For the adjudication process to take as long as it did is unacceptable. So with that being said, we need to build a department that is going to meet all of the standards. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought just that fast.
It's okay. It was the obstacles associated with accomplishing those three priorities.
Rebuilding trust is going to be the problem. I have quoted from Nietzsche 2 other times since I've had meetings with Glynn County. I understand what Black Lives Matter is trying to do. I understand what Antifa is trying to do. I understand all of these other grassroots organizations out here. All feel they have a constitutional right to express their views, to express their values, to express their feelings, all in the belief that they all are seeking a better America. But when you have a January 6th at the U.S. Capitol, or you have rioting and protesting and burning and looting in cities, those are violations of everyone else's constitutional rights. And that is what is acceptable, what is unacceptable. And with that being such, we have to make sure that that never happens. So when I say Nietzsche, it is quoted that there are those individuals within these organizations that have a hidden agenda, that even though on the surface everything is clear and to the point, they want chaos. They want a breakdown in the moral fiber of this country. They want a defunding of the police. They want any type of authority removed so that criminality may rise. And Nietzsche states that in chaos there is order, as long as you're the person causing the chaos. So if you can be in control and cause chaos and get everyone else off canter and remove the only reigning authority being law enforcement to stop you, the game is lost already. So what we have to do as Glynn County with the upcoming trial October 8th is educate our community on all of the legal standards going on with that trial every day. We also have to get our community on board with believing in its, not only its police department, but its sheriff's department, its City of Brunswick Police Department, and understand that they're all here to protect you. So when you see individuals coming into this county that want to tear this county down from the inside out, you as the citizens have to work with the county police and everyone else, GBI, state police, no matter how you feel about them. Work with them, help them to save this county. Keep it from being a roadmap to chaos. And in the end, you'll find that these officers, not just from our county police, but from all over, will give their very lives to protect you all in this community. But it's got to be a two-way street. And we have to make sure you all are educated in all of the processes each day with the trial to understand that in this particular day, this happened, and this happened. So that when the trial concludes and the verdict is read, no one is surprised either way on which way it went. And that helps also to prepare people not to become overzealous in what the rendering is, but to be prepared that it could go one way or the other, and to be more accepting of what the situation may bring. Let me ask one question. Audience, did I make sense with that last question to you? Okay. All right, I feel like I'm just throwing them out there, but no, I'm on point, I believe, but I just want to make sure you all are good with it.
As you formulate your plan to lead Glynn County Police Department, what does your first 100 days plan look like?
A vacation. No, for those of you who don't know, I'm a serving police officer in New Orleans right now. I'm a line officer. I'm not rank or anything. I serve as the training and tactical supervisor, which means I'm teaching my officers every day about better professionalism within the public. I will be leaving that job directly. Should I receive the blessings to come here, I'll be leaving straight from one job to the other. For those of you who have never been to New Orleans, it's a great place to visit, but we have a huge problem right now with the youth, ages 12 to 17. They are committing major case felonies daily. I'm working 16, 17 hours a day in the streets. Carjackings, theft, violence, murders. We've never seen this level of violence in the city to this level with a group under the age of 21. And there are no answers that are close to being solved because, like many cities, they're lost as to what to do. So the first 100 days I want to do is meet with not only my officers, our officers, every day to kind of get an understanding, but I want to start some advisory groups if they're not already in place. Get the community to start sharing with me problems that they see that need short-term fixing as well as long-term growth. One of the things I intend to do is have every 3 months a collaboration meeting where at the table I have representatives from every county agency, federal agency, state agency, and any of the other entities that could help make Glynn County a much more prolific and economically viable community. The idea is for us to sit at a huge table, kick out the main issues and focus that are brought to us by what the community is seeing, come up with resolution points, standards, chop it up so that everyone has a piece, a stakeholder. What has happened in our community is all of these agencies have siloed themselves on how they should be approaching situations. So what we have to do is meet as a group, meet as a family, meet as a village, and decide what's best for the community. We also want to do the same thing with the community. Once every 3 months, I want to invite all of my advisors, all of my community faith-based worship, any active groups that want to have a voice to come to meetings. Let me know what's going on. Do I need to pour it or drink it? You know, folks, if you give me just a second, my mouth is cotton mouth dry. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. I want the public to be able to tell me and to help me to fix the problems they see that this department is capable of working within. But then I want us to be smart enough to work outside of those boundaries and see other problems that we could actively step into and help and solve. So that's the whole reason for having these advisory boards and collaboration meetings, not just within the law enforcement, fire, EMS community, not dealing just with mental health issues. Let's have Social Security sit at the table so those individuals who are in our community, the elderly, can be reassured every 3 months that Social Security is still going to be in place in another 2 years, that my pension plan, my health care plans, Health and Human Services have all of these individuals there to answer questions. If you have a problem with parking violations in a certain area of the city, let's get them to the table and find out what is happening that these citizens are receiving these inordinate amount of tickets. How can we work with the community to try to save them some money? If there is any number of other issues, the whole idea is we can't solve it as a group if we don't know it exists. And just being siloed and talking about it in one circle may not help the overall community. We've got to be willing to help everyone that lives out on the islands as well as everybody that lives in the inner city. It's got to be an even playing field across the board.
Thank you, sir. Could you talk about how your experience in the FBI will contribute to your approach in managing Glynn County Police Department's relationship with the state and federal law enforcement partners?
Yes, sir. During my time with the FBI, I had a number of opportunities, and I saw some of the lovely comments that were written on the Board of Commissioners Facebook page. I am a cop. I'm not a bureaucrat. I believe in protecting each and every one of your families the way I would protect my own family. I have been trained across the board in every aspect of law enforcement training, whether it's gangs, drugs, violence, murders, homicide. I've had a fair share of it all. The great thing with working with the FBI is I was able to work several task force groups within major cities, Baltimore, Chicago, worked undercover operations, and understood what people were dealing with in their societal values. With that being said, I also worked my last opportunity with the FBI with the Office of Partnership Engagement, which means I specifically work with Fortune 500 groups, other law enforcement agencies, and most importantly, I work with the public. One of the things you all are going to notice about me is I come out to the public and I'm going to be teaching classes myself to the general public. Human trafficking, active shooter, not for law enforcement, but for non-law enforcement. I'm going to be the dangers of fentanyl, the dangers of opioids. These are classes that I intend to bring to you because as an FBI instructor, I worked with the Chamber of Commerce. I worked with the communities. I worked with the faith-based worship groups. I feel that my job has always been to serve the public. And no greater glory is there than to serve your fellow man. And that's what I want to be able to do with each and every one of you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I'm going to ask you to bear with me, not only you, but the audience as a whole. As I said in the very beginning, there were some questions that some content needed to be added to. And this is one of those questions. So I'm going to read some content, and then I'll ask the questions as needed. So please bear with me. The Pelian principles summarize the ideas that Sir Robert Peel developed to define an ethical police force. In this model of policing, police officers are regarded as citizens in uniform. They exercise their powers to police their fellow citizens with the implicit consent of those fellow citizens. Policing by consent indicates that the legitimacy of policing in the eyes of the public is based upon a general consensus of support that follows from transparency about their powers, their integrity in exercising those powers, and their accountability in doing so. What is your position on Peel's principle of professional policing?
I studied the Peel's principle on professional policing. Believe it or not, I didn't encounter it first in the United States. I encountered it with the Kenyan National Police. I encountered it with the UK Met Police. I encountered it with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and working directly with them on investigations. This country also has accepted the Peel's process. I think it is an invaluable tool to maintaining discipline, order, and ethical values within law enforcement today. Unfortunately, like with so many other things, we've slid away from basic principles, and we need to go back to the foundation, the dynamics of good policing, and the Peel's Doctrine enhances and qualifies all of that. It sets the road straight on how good policing should be done to ensure faithful, trustful policing for everyone in that community.
The secondary part of that question is, do you think those principles can be used to improve policing in Glynn County?
Most definitely. To add to that, maybe not every exact standard out of it, but it sets a roadmap for helping enhance Glynn County's already profitable history of having a good police department at one time or another. Every department may have had negativity in it, but there's always a brighter hope if that department is willing to work towards a brighter tomorrow. And by that I mean officers have to come to terms with the past, deal with it, accept it, and move forward from it, almost as a phoenix rising from the ashes. We have got to be a newborn police department moving into this next decade, and we have got to bring the trust back to the community.
All right. Were you responsible for formulating the budget in your previous positions? And could you share an example of a cost-benefit decision you had to make?
Yes, when I was chief of police, Xavier University, I laugh because I had a patrols sector, I had a bike unit, I had an SRT team, I had a special investigations unit. The school only gave me $98,000. I don't know if you understand, with 12 police cars, fuel, maintenance, equipment for the officers, overtime, meeting the needs of everything that the community needed, as well as we had to do a whole lot of hocus pocus. But because of the opportunities that I had to have good relationships with my area community police leaders, a lot of the things we were able to do was in favor exchange. If you can help me with this, if you can supply this, we'll be able to do this for you down the road. I called in favors from the federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies to get over the humps of having an active budget to meet the standards when the school felt that I didn't need them. One of the key things that I first got to the department and found was a problem was that my officers were going out every day, doing car stops, doing interdictions, doing drug arrests, fights, shootings, and the officers weren't supplied with Kevlar vests. How can you expect people to go out and patrol an area of the city like Gertown and Holly Grove in Louisiana, which are basically the crossroads of mayhem and chaos, and the officers only have a vest if they have the money to buy it for themselves? I only had $98,000 for 32 officers. That would have been $68,000 I had to raise to buy vests for every officer. I immediately went to my corporate sponsors, my my Fortune 500 sponsors, between Motorola Corporation, between Axiom, between, who was the other one? And between the president of the university seeing the need, I was able to raise not $68,000 but $75,000 to buy each and every one of those officers a new vest. And with my SWAT team, I was able to get level 4 vests with trauma plates for them, because we were the only SWAT team, or SRT team, excuse me, of the 9 universities in the area, and we were on call to respond to hostage barricade situations at different universities due to whatever problems there were. When death threats came in from students to the different universities, our team was the first to be called to neighboring universities to respond. Vehicles, another offset. I only had 6 operating vehicles for 32 officers. Those vehicles were working 24 hours a day, nonstop. And when one went down, We had to get personal vehicles and put lights on them to drive around. Unacceptable. So the first thing I did was ask the school to buy me 4 vehicles. They told me, we don't have the money for you. I contacted Chief John Letney, who is the incoming national president for International Association of Chiefs of Police. He was the chief at Apex, North Carolina, my hometown. I grew up in a very small hometown in the Carolinas, so I understand hometown living. So I said to him, John, this is my problem. I need at least 5 vehicles, but I don't have any money, but I don't know what to do. He says, let me make a call. He speaks to his board of commissioners. He calls me back. He says, I have 4 Crown Vics and a Chevy Impala detective's car, all with less than 100,000 miles sitting in my parking lot that we've surplused. I can sell them to you each for $1,000. Christmas came. So I go to the school and I say, I can get these vehicles as long as you all offer me insurance for them. Go ahead and do it, Chief, because they didn't think I could do it. When that car carrier came in and dropped off 5 Crown Vics, almost brand new, and a Chevy Impala into the parking lot, I was called everything but a child of God. Then came the question of how do I get lights and sirens for these cars? I went to Sheriff Lapinto with the Sheriff's Department. He gave me all the lights and siren at no charge because they were surplused out of his old vehicles. Perfectly good equipment that they were going to throw away, but through an MOU, he put them in the cars. I ended up buying those cars for $1,000 a piece, and those cars are still being used by the department now, which basically saved the overall motor fleet. I may not be able to manage $18, $20 million without help, but I sure know as hell how to manage 100,000. Let me tell you, I can make a nickel scream when I have to. And through working with good people in my department, we will make sure we have enough money to meet all of the needs that the county is expecting for this department to be successful. Whatever amount that is, I'm allocated.
All right. Thank you, sir. If you are appointed as chief of Glynn County Police Department, will you keep the current management structure? If so, will interim chief Ricky Evans resume his previous position as assistant chief?
That question was posed to me at another interview session. To remove or dismiss Chief Evans would be an egregious mistake for the department, and it would be more so for myself. Chief Evans has grown up in this department. You all know him, you trust him, you believe in him. I've known him for over 15 years. I first met him at the G8 Summit when it was hosted here in 2004. We became friends then, and we've been associates ever since. To remove him would be my worst mistake because I can learn from him. I can learn the lay of the land, I can learn where the problems are, and he can help me to overcome whatever obstacles may have been in place before. You can ask the Board of Commissioners. They asked me, would I keep him? I said yes. I also stated that if they chose him as to be the next chief and I wasn't chosen, I would love to still come here and work as the deputy chief. That's how invested I am in Glynn County. Glynn County reminds me of the very home that I grew up in North Carolina. It's the same racial makeup, the same economic makeup, and I want to make sure we can reach the same profitable standards for this county that I did back in Apex, North Carolina.
Thank you, sir. Time-wise, we're starting to reach close to that point of 7 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
So I have time for probably one more question. So with that being said, I'm going to ask this question. Can the public count on the officers of Glynn County Police Department to continue to be allowed to conduct proactive policing practices to reduce and prevent crime in Glynn County under your leadership?
That is a double-edged sword question because there are certain operations that people may feel are overarching may target only certain people in the community or certain groups in the community. My answer is this: there will be a complete review of every operational standard that we're operating by and representing the county. Those that seem to be overarching, what we want to then do is bring in those individuals who feel that these programs violate certain rights. We want to have a citizens-based training and understanding of what is trying to be accomplished by those, let's call them task force, okay? Cap, is that about right? We want to call them task force? Say, for instance, we have a drug initiative that is targeting a certain area of the city. Individuals may not understand why they're only focused in that area of the city and not across Glynn County as a whole. We then want to make sure the public is understanding we have a reason to believe that there is intelligence that shows that this is a pipeline for something greater coming into Glynn County. We can't fix the problem unless we deal with it at the surface. We also want to be respectful of that community, and we want to make sure the community leaders work with us in understanding why there's a targeting of that area. If it becomes a problem where they feel it's overarching, believe me, I'll be the first one to say, halt, stop, let's step back, let's take a look at it. Because if there's a better way to do it, we're going to figure it out. But at the end of the day, like I said before, we want to make sure each citizen of this county wakes up and goes to sleep feeling that they're respected and appreciated and are respected as taxpayers of this county.
Again, let me thank everyone for submitted questions. I apologize that we do not have the time to ask each and every question that was submitted. We want to be respectful of everyone's time and definitely be respectful of Mr. Battiste's time. Before we close, however, I would like to give you an opportunity to share any last thoughts that you may want to share with the citizens of Glynn County.
Thank you, sir. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for this privilege. I've been given an honor and a blessing to be able to possibly serve as your next police chief. I can promise you every day I will bring my A game to the table. I will make sure you all are happy with the choices that you made. You may not see it initially. All I ask for is that you just give me time to make change. Excuse me, I never said I was going to use that word. Enhancements. Enhancements. Let me have enough time to make the enhancements necessary. But in the meantime, do not hesitate to pull me up when you see me, call me. I will entertain anyone's issues or problems as long as we can do it respectfully. Once we lose respect, communication breaks down on your end, not mine. I'm going to always listen, but I need for all of you to let me be a person who can work with your current police department to make that police department an even more role model police department in the long run. Again, I want to thank the Board of Commissioners. I want to thank the Georgia Bureau of Chiefs of Police, Noble, and anyone else that played a role in me being able to sit here before you today. And most importantly, I want to thank you all for the questions you submitted. Hopefully, I've answered those questions to the best of my ability, not necessarily maybe always to the liking of you, but I can only be truthful and transparent with you and what I feel may be the best way forward for this department. And I thank you.
Mr. Battiste, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being a part of this forum. At this time, this concludes our formal question and answer session. I don't know if Mr. Battiste will be allowed or would be available, I'm not going to say allowed, but be available to answer any informal questions, but that does conclude our formal question and answer session. Thank you for everyone that came and everyone that is listening via stream.